All right. Um, so, John, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate you being part of my new series where I'm interviewing accomplished IT leaders, cyber leaders, and CISOs uh, across the industry. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Beautiful background. Do you mind telling us where you're located?
Yeah, so I am currently in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Um, I work for a company called PPG Industries. We have a pretty big building downtown, and if you can see in the background, a pretty nice ice rink in our right in our backyard. So
I love it. Yep, that ice rink is famous, and it's pretty cool. Pretty cool, especially on a little bit of a warmer day like today in Pittsburgh. So,
Well, unfortunately, I've been outside today, but others were telling me that it is warmer. But people are still skating on it, which is definitely nice. So better than the weather we had earlier in the week.
absolutely, absolutely. So, John, if you don't mind, just to start out, for folks who haven't met you yet or don't know you, how would you describe your journey and maybe give us a little background of what you do today?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, my current role is Chief Information Security Officer for PPG Industries. We are a global coatings manufacturer. So producing um, coatings or paint for many of those things we use in everyday life. So it doesn't matter if it's an automobile, if it's a plane, it's a boat. We usually produce some sort of coating. We have 9 different strategic business units. We are headquartered currently in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but we operate in, I'd say, probably over 73 different countries, 200 and some different facilities around the world. Um, a little bit about my journey. I've been at PPG for about 18 years. As a summary, I'd say I did not grow up in cybersecurity. I have a well-rounded information technology experience. I actually started as a software developer. I worked in many of our strategic business units across PPG, doing a lot of IT work, specifically dedicated to those businesses. I was heavily involved with acquisitions, in the past that PPG has done. Trying to integrate those companies into our framework, into our enterprise. I started as in security, and I lose track of time because I think I'm having so much fun, Dan. But I started in security about 6 years ago. Actually, a prior mentor of mine kind of pulled me into security, and then I became CISO of PPG. I always get into these conversations, right? I think a lot of my experience, my well-rounded IT experience, has absolutely helped me as a CISO. I know a lot of those different technologies that are out there, specifically in PPG, but you can talk a lot about the technologies that today we're trying to secure. So a little bit of background on me, you know, and and
That's great.
just continue to move forward.
Yeah, I love that. Like me, like you, I grew up working at another quintessential IT manufacturing company. I started my career at US Steel, and my first job was working in the data center as a operations analyst at US Steel, and worked shifts and summers and nights, and um, you know, really got to touch so many things as a OA, working what we call the OA corral. And I agree with you. I think learning a lot of those technologies early in the career, like, can really put you on a fast track to understanding how to secure those technologies, right? So
Absolutely.
I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, so for you, like, what can you talk a little bit more about that defining moment when you decided to kind of make the leap into more of a full-time security focused role. You know, you described a mentor of yours, and um, that sounded like helped give you a little nudge right along that way. Like, was there a defining moment, or really what clicked for you to kind of make that like more full-time switch?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I did talk about my mentor, and that mentor um, was my mentor early in my career. So, back when, I was a software developer, I was working in one of our business units. He was my mentor then. And I'll say at that time, I didn't really think about being in security. I think as time grew on, as time went on, I went into different roles at PPG, and I can think of one role that really started to change my thinking. Right, so um, as part of the one of the roles, PPG at some point bought a couple companies. Um, as we integrate those companies, we spend a lot of time integrating all the aspects of that company. So if you think about, the people, the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure along the way, um, I would tell you that's when I first started really thinking about security. I was looking at and experiencing trying to bring in two smaller companies, significantly smaller companies, into
Yeah.
PPG, trying to understand what their um, process was, trying to understand what challenges they had. And I, definitely saw, there were certain aspects of these smaller companies just weren't thinking about cybersecurity. And really started to ask a lot of questions around it, started to get interested in it, and really started to, I'd say it started to hit my radar, and really just thinking, hey, I'm looking and seeing these risks, and these risks probably go across many different small companies, within the U.S., within the world, right? And a lot of these companies probably need help. So that's really what flipped. I'll say what started changing my thinking. I really thought I could make a difference. Really thought with my skills that I talked about earlier that I could make a difference in these companies, and really help bridge those gaps between security and a lot of these business processes. So that's really what started to change my thinking. I think after that is when I reached back out to my former mentor, maybe had a little bit of a conversation. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I I love that you share that story. I think there is a imbalance, right, across the enterprises versus like the medium to smaller size companies, and the same threats exist for them, right? And that imbalance is tough. I mean, even large enterprises are still resource constrained, and there's
absolutely.
this thing called the economy and spending power, and it affects budgets. And when your budget has to stay the same or even shrink for a security team, it can be challenging. You have to get
Yep.
resourceful, right?
Yeah. And I think, Dan, you think about all that, and right, yeah, I mean, there is always these budget constraints, or funding, or we have to go vie for our case, right? But I think there's still differences that you can make that also don't involve funding, right? I think there's a lot of processes you can put in place, right? That just a lot of governance you can put in place. I mean, might involve some funding, but it's not always that new shiny tool that you're gonna go buy, right? So, and I think that's the one thing that people I think need to think about more, right? And, it's not really always going to get that, you know, $5 million funding or $1 million funding or even $50,000 funding, right? I think there's definitely things you can do along the way to make sure the right governance is in place.
So money doesn't buy happiness or better cybersecurity necessarily, right?
Hey, I think
Maybe a
there's a
little.
song out there, right? It can help, right? But
Yeah,
there's things you
absolutely.
can do otherwise.
So your answer was perfect segue to my next thought here, and it's, security leaders often have to evolve a lot faster.
Yep.
Sometimes you evolve faster than your organization, or you're evolving, the security role has to evolve faster than the technology stack at an organization. That landscape can change on a dime, right? Like we're as security professionals, I feel like the speed and rate at which we have to stay ahead uh, is mind-boggling at times. Um, how have you changed your leadership approach or your approach to your job to make sure that the speed at which you have to learn keeps up with the rate of change?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I can easily say it's not easy, right? There's a lot that's going on out there in the world, right? I'd say over time, I've seen significant. I go back and say in my short time, that let's just say I've been doing this for 6 years. I'd say there's significant shifts in what a lot of these threat actors are doing, right? You can see the evolution that they kind of shift towards throughout the past couple years, right? And again, there's probably no strategy to that, right? It kind of goes back to the path of least resistance is kind of really what they look for. I think a shift in some technology does maybe enable that or help
Yep,
that.
for sure. Yep.
But I think it's definitely the path of least resistance. You know, I think a couple things. You really have to as you think about how I've changed, right? I think in security, specifically for these roles, your team, right? Your team means a lot to you, right? You have to trust everybody on your team, or it's probably not going to work out too well, right? It's going to be a challenge. So, you really have to look at your team different. You have to make sure you have the right team in place. Um, and make sure that you are comfortable if somebody else is going to lead, right? That you are comfortable with what those decisions are going to be made. So I can't say enough about that aspect for me. I think that's what I've changed. I've had to build mature my team. I've had to build the team. You've had to build it the way that you wanted it to make sure you are comfortable because ultimately it rests on your shoulders.
Staying on that team angle for a minute, one of the things I want to ask is, this idea of overworked security teams, right? And preventing things like burnout and, making sure that the team stays healthy and happy. And, um, it, for me sometimes, right, it's like, how do you, um, tell people to stop helping, right? Because most people that are in security, they have this mindset that they just want to help and they want to, make things better and turn things around. And it just comes naturally to them. And I think that's why a lot of people are drawn, to careers in this field. But then it's also tough to tell them to shut it off, pull it back a little bit and take a break and, shut the screens off. And um, how do you, as a leader, help protect your team, from uh, doing too much?
Yeah. It's a problem when you have a good team, right?
Totally.
Um, but I would say, right, you have to make sure you're talking about rotations, right? I think that becomes very, very important for us. Just making sure that I talked a little bit earlier about the trust, right? There has to be multiple levels of trust amongst your team that you can rely on different people, making sure when you rely, you have those trusts, you have those rotations that give people a break, right? You're going to get
Yeah.
into incidents. You're going to get into long hours, and you need breaks. Everybody needs breaks, because if not, you're going to, your mind is going to start to wander, and then you're going to make bad decisions. So you need breaks, and you need rotations. You need, I'll say, a depth of a team. But that being said, on the softer side, right? Taking a lot of breaks, having fun, laughing, during the day. I mean, all those little things that,
Human
you know,
interactions. Yeah.
exactly, right. I can tell you, it's, a lot of us around here, we come back to the office, and, we'll do just a lot of lunches, and a lot of maybe outings. I think one time we went and played pickleball.
Oh, nice.
And just making sure you're taking a break. We actually have a fantasy football, a little bit of a fantasy football challenge too, that
Oh, we
kind of
do
gets us
too.
off our mind, right?
Yeah,
So
that's great.
you have to do that, right? Because if not, um, you never know when the next alert's going to come. Right? It's not going to come at 3 o'clock on a Monday, right? It's going to come on 8 p.m. on a Saturday, right? So
On
you have
Christmas
to do
Eve.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. Let's hope not. Yeah,
Yeah, knock
I'm
on
not going
wood.
to put here, man.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. We have a saying sometimes that I've heard our teammates be like, all right, shut it down, go touch grass, right? Just get
Yeah,
outside, go touch some grass, like, take your eyes off the screen for a little bit. That's one of the big reasons, you might have seen we do hikes at all of our like employee offsites. It's just like, let's get out of the, conference room and let's just breathe
yeah,
some fresh air and walk shoulder to shoulder together. So I love
yeah.
that.
There's nothing, and you want to avoid, right, doing things where, somebody can open that laptop again, right? Sometimes it's not just about, hey, go home, because somebody's going to open a laptop, right?
Yeah,
I like that idea. Hiking's a big thing of ours, but we'll a lot of those other things of just getting away from the technology, right? You have to clear your mind.
absolutely. John, I'm curious to hear from your perspective, like what is maybe one of the most overhyped things that security teams are spending energy on right now?
Um, so this one's a big challenge for me. Definitely probably pick a lot of them. I think maybe it's a little bit more of a pet peeve and a frustration of mine. I think there's a lot of time spent right now on questionnaires and third party risk.
Hmm.
And again, I'm
Hmm.
not saying it's not necessarily valuable. I think there's a lot of energy that's put into them.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of resources.
Mm.
Um, and I really haven't seen a measurable difference or impact in a lot of those works, right? I think there could be. I think the challenge we run into in this industry is there's not standards, right? Well, there is standards. There's not a common standard, right? And I just haven't found a lot of benefit in what I'm seeing out there today. I've seen some promises.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen different level of promises, but I will tell you, as a very large company, we get hundreds of these questionnaires a year, right? So it's very hard to see the benefit in some of them. I think that is a big challenge for us. Um, and again, as compared to other things, I think that's one of our challenges.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, a lot of energy goes into those, and it's not the definitely not the most efficient process. And I've seen lots of different attempts at attacking that, and AI is obviously, I think, helping in some ways now with that. But yeah, definitely something that needs to change. And I look forward to the entrepreneurs that are working on that challenge.
And I mean, Dan, I do think that there is, AI could play a part in that. I think that the part that I struggle with too is whether you are or you're not, you're kind of signing your name to responses too, right? So it's a little bit of, I feel my comfort level is there has to be a little bit more detail and effort put into it, because I don't want to send something that is wrong to somebody that could come back on us, right? So that's part of my.
Um, what is a big misconception that you think younger cyber professionals have about being a CISO and what that actually entails and what that means?
Yeah, very good question, because I get onto this topic with a lot of I'll say younger professionals. My big thing is the work that we do is absolutely not always security focused. Well, let me rephrase the way I said that. It is security focused, but I believe we have to be much more of a business person as much as a security person. Um, I talk a lot with my teams about the technical side of this, but I probably talk just as much or more on the business side of what we're trying to do. What's the risk of what's out there? What's the risk of how a business is operating? I have to understand, what's going on. And then it kind of really gets into, takes a lot of interpersonal skills to do a lot of those interactions, right? You can take away a lot of that, conversations about firewalls and about MFA, and while it involves some of that, I think there's a lot more on the business side of trying to manage the risk for a company.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people don't always realize.
Yeah, you absolutely have to be more of a business leader than a technology leader for a lot of it, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Um, yeah, I see that misconception a lot too. I think some younger professionals think if they could be the master technical person, across a lot of topics, that's the ticket to being a CISO, when I think that's the ticket to success either way, right? Like that's not a losing strategy, but I don't think that is quite the ticket or what a CISO does on a daily basis.
No, and it's a good point. I think there's no doubt you have to have those technical skills to get to that level. But at some point in time, as you're evolving, it starts to change, right? It starts to
Totally.
change from, hey, I used to code to now I don't code anymore, right? I think, you get into a lot more, you used to get into a lot more technical discussions. And now it gets into really higher levels around, just, how are you operating? How's this business operating in this region? Or how is this business meeting this compliance aspect? Or, hey, what decisions do we have to make to use this particular tool, right? And you really have to start to think about, okay, how is this business operating? And then how are they going to use this tool? And how's that going to affect security? So there's no doubt, right, that the technical aspect had to have been there before you got to the level. But I think at some point in the career, it starts to change, right? You start to become less technical, and you have to learn um, the business side, the interpersonal side, the communication side, all those soft skills that a lot of people talk about.
Yeah. So I have a question. It's a fun one that I like to ask. If you could put a message on a billboard, um, like Boulevard of the Allies, big billboard, you got to pass it on the way to work every day, um, that every new CISO had to read once a day. Uh, what would it say?
Wow, it's a good question, Dan. Man, um, I think I've already talked a little bit about it earlier, and I don't remember what answer. And it would be something around, as you're taking the role, maybe something like, you know, the first couple months of your job is really for earning trust, not necessarily for spending money or buying tools. Um, and I said this earlier to you, right? I don't think money solves the whole problem, right? I mean, there's investments that have to be made. But I think truly understanding the governance side, the risk side, and don't get me wrong, money can help. But I think there's a lot of work to be done to make sure you have the right governance processes in place. So I don't know, to sum that up, right? Maybe something like, uh, you know, the first, first couple months are for earning trust and maybe not buying tools, and money doesn't solve all the problems or all the risk problems in the world.
Yeah.
Because I truly think, and I've talked with a lot of people, right? A lot of different CISOs. When you come into this role, I feel like you get on those discussions. Hey, I don't have money, or hey, I don't have this, or not sure they are going to fund me here, or I can't do this because I don't have this money. And um, my general feeling is if you're building that trust, if you're building that confidence in your boss or leaders or executive leaders are going to have in you, I think that comes, right? They're going to see the risk, they're going to see the problem, and I think they're going to invest in your program, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I got to go back to, you have to build that trust before you walk in. You say, hey, I need millions of dollars, right? I think that's very, very important for me.
Yeah. Build trust, not budget. John O'Rourke.
Yeah. That's another way to put it. Yeah, there you go.
I love it. I love it. Trust first, budget later.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great. Um, so I imagine that you've worked with, or have networked in the greater CISO community with a lot of talented leaders, um, whether it's in your industry or not, right? Who is one, CISO or cyber leader, IT leader that you believe deserves to be highlighted like this, or someone that's made an impact on you in your travels?
Um, Probably, so there's somebody that kind of in our industry a little bit, but I don't know. He sticks out as one of the first people that I've really started to develop an acquaintance with across this industry. We text or chat a lot, sometimes more often, sometimes less often. But he's the CISO of Eastman Chemical Company. His name's Adam Cohen, and I'll have to get you his information, and maybe he would be willing to talk with you. But he's a former FBI, and we tend to chat a decent amount at times.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I feel like it's good to create that community of people that you can trust and share, bounce ideas off of, and especially in what you do every day, I think that is very, very important. And
You you have to have that, right? And you need that, right? I think you go back to the stress of the job, right? You asked the question earlier around the stress of the job, and how do you take breaks? That's another way to really um, get some self maybe mentoring, or bouncing ideas off of other people. You have to have those relationships. You have to build those relationships. It's important for your own health, for your own satisfaction, right? I think we always say, right, we're all kind of dealing with the same problem.
yeah,
Sometimes a little bit more challenging, maybe a little bit different. But I can tell you, a lot of people that you talk to, um, it's kind of funny. We all end up talking about the very same thing. I feel like we all kind of move on a similar pace, right? It's just the degree of maturity along the way, right? And I think
hmm
I think that's where you need the help from your network, to validate what you're doing, to validate conversations you're having, and um, making sure you feel comfortable in how you're operating. So
great answer. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, um, I think we're good. I think we covered a ton of ground and a ton of great topics, and I think you really shared a lot and opened up. So really appreciate you doing that. It's not often that we get to hear such good advice from a great leader in the community. So really appreciate that, and a fellow Duquesne Duke, I should say,
You are
as
definitely
well.
right, Dan. So,
Yeah,
graduated in 2001. So,
yeah,
yeah,
making
thank you very
making us
much for the
Duquesne Duke.
opportunity.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm flattered that you joined us, and it's been great getting to know you over the years as well, and being a friend. So uh, thank you for being such a supporter, and yeah, this is fantastic.
Thank you, Dan. Always love the conversation that we have. So appreciate the time.